Hi there, the Wealth Coach checking in, and today I'd like to talk about investment risk. And no matter whether your portfolio is $5,000 or $500,000, investment risk is a major concern. There's a mathematical term out there to describe risk. It's called standard deviation. And we'll use those numbers, but we'll refer to it as risk factor here. So I think it makes more sense to use that term. Now, we've also created this concept we call the risk spectrum. And on there, you can kind of see where your portfolio stands up to whatever else is out there and available. For example, over here at the safest side of the risk spectrum, we have U.S. Treasuries. Standard deviation, risk factor, about 2.5%. Now, over at the riskiest, wildest ride of investments, those would be things like commodities and emerging market equities. The risk factor there is between 30 and 35%, significantly more. U.S. stocks, you're right about there. 20 to 24% risk factor. You can get the portfolio risk factor down by mixing a whole bunch of different asset classes, ones that don't correlate well. And that's what good professional portfolio managers are doing. And they can dial down the risk factor to between 12, 14, maybe 15%. You can go all fixed income and lower the risk factor even more, but you do take a serious hit when it comes to returns. So that's half the equation. But then we also have the return risk ratio, which you need to understand. Because risk on its own means nothing unless it's compared to the amount of returns that you're getting. So the return risk ratio is pretty simple. We take the expected return for whatever the portfolio is, and we put that at the top of the equation. And then we put whatever the risk factor is for that portfolio underneath. We divide the return by the risk factor. And that risk ratio comes out, well, like this. S&P 500, expected rate of return is somewhere between 7 and 10%. Historically, it's made 7%. I know a lot of people hope that their stock market portfolios will make 10%. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt for this exercise. And let's just say you get a 10% expected rate of return, and your expected risk, the risk factor on S&P 500, is about 20%. So 10% divided by 20% equals 0.5. There you go. Now, over here again on the safe side of the risk spectrum, we have U.S. Treasuries. Historically, they've made about 4.5%. I'm going to say that they probably aren't going to make that kind of rate of return in the next several years. We'll call it 2.5% expected rate of return with a risk factor of 2.5%. And so you put 2.5% return at the top, 2.5% risk underneath. You divide the two and you get a ratio of 1, which is better than a ratio of 0.5. And that's what we do when we're building portfolios here at Wildest Wealth Solutions. We're constructing portfolios with the greatest amount of return and the least amount of risk. Simple, huh? If you have more questions on this, feel free to call me or send me an email. And until next time, I hope this has helped.